Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight, Assessing Special Education Evaluation and Eligibility. I think we're just letting a few more people in here and then we'll get started.
Okay, Renee, I'm going to let you move to the next slide, and I will just from afar, without a picture showing, I am Kelly Henderson with Forum Families Forward, and I'm pleased to welcome you. I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping, then turn it over to our presenters. We really do appreciate you making the effort. It's a very windy day here in Northern Virginia, so hopefully you are somewhere safe and with power. And it stays that way. So housekeeping, we are using the GoToWebinar platform, which is a little bit different than Zoom. So I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. You should have a set of pods probably on the right-hand side of your screen, unless you've moved it around. It looks something like what's in the picture. There are bluish gray bars, and those are different access points for you. There is a handouts pod, and you'll see 3 of 5 handouts there, and that 3 includes a set of the slides that Renee and Beth are going to be using. You can download that for your use later or tonight. And in addition, there are 2 flyers in that handout pod that you may find helpful for upcoming events and opportunities that we have at Forum Families Forward. You will see messages from us in the chat box, but please use the questions pod to ask anything that you might have to ask Renee or Beth, or if you have a comment, I will be monitoring the questions pod. So again, please use the questions pod. And if we get to the end, we can unmute folks if we have a fairly small group. So there will be opportunity at the end to ask questions directly. Finally, if you need a certificate of attendance, please email us at info@formedfamiliesforward.org. Thanks, Renee. Just a quick little note about who we are at Forum Families Forward. We are a family-led nonprofit that serves Northern Virginia's foster, adoptive, and kinship families who are raising children, youth, and young adults with special needs, as well as the professionals that work with our families. We do our work through providing free trainings, much like this one, in person and virtually. We do offer free of charge consultations to families on education and mental health navigation. We provide events. We have a big event coming up on April 30th, our Spring Forward Family Fun Fair, which will be in person after several years. Back in person at the George Mason Manassas campus on April 30th. Fun for the whole family. So take a look at our website for more information on that. We help with systems navigation. We have a fabulous resource directory that's available again from our webpage. We have a number of videos. We have peer support groups. We have peer support groups for youth and young adults, and we have peer support groups for parents, caregivers. And we are always here to help. So don't hesitate to email us. You'll see Renee and Beth's email at the bottom, and you'll see mine if you need anything further. Again, use your questions pod during the session if you need anything. Renee, will you just hit one more slide? Just a reminder that this is the first of our 4-part series on accessing special education. We're really pleased you joined us and hope that you might come back for 2, 3, 4 more. We have initial evaluations tonight that Renee is going to launch us on shortly, and then we will talk about re-evaluations, sometimes called triennial evaluations, and we'll cover that next week. 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to talk about special education specifically for formed families, in other words, foster, adoptive, and kinship families, some of those sticking points and things that might be a little unique to our family makeup. And then our last one in the series is a topic related to military families and helping military families navigate services in our region, especially if you're sort of new to the disability world or might be just getting started with special education eligibility. So we invite you to register. Those each have separate registrations, and I will put the specific registrations in the chat once Renee gets started. I think that concludes my section. Yep, I'm going to launch a poll and I'm going to let Renee and Beth take over.
So hi, everybody. I'm Renee. And before we get started tonight, we wanted to get a sense of who's here. So if you could just mark or chat in any roles that apply to you and add any that we did not include.
And we'll give it about 10 more seconds. And we do have someone who's chatted in that they are a CASA, so we know that's not one of our 5 descriptions, so thank you for the additional information. And again, you can use the questions pod at any time to chat in any additional information. I'm going to close the poll in about 2 seconds. And Renee, are you able to see that, or shall I read it?
I am not able to see them.
Okay, let me do that. And I will be sending, just so I noticed that there's a question about the email address for the certificate, and I will give you that. So in just a moment, our poll results are 18% adoptive parent, 36% kinship caregiver, 55% foster or resource parent, 45% professional, and 27% birth family. And I should be able to drop that out of there. And Renee, it should be all yours. Let's see, let's close that. Yep, you're good to go.
So our objectives tonight are to answer some questions. Number one being, what is special education? Who gets special education? What is involved in an evaluation for special education? What's the timeline for that evaluation? And should you be concerned with a special education label? So those are the questions that we're going to try to answer tonight as we go through this presentation. So special education is a program of specialized educational services provided to students with disabilities. In the US, that guarantee of special education to children with disabilities is rooted in federal legislation called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. You probably have heard of it as IDEA or IDEA. And the IDEA legislation guarantees special education to eligible children with disabilities. So some of the things that IDEA guarantees are a free and appropriate public education. That means at no cost. And that may, you may have heard that referred to as FAPE. IDEA also guarantees that students with disabilities can get specially designed instruction that will meet their individual unique needs. IDEA guarantees placement in the least restrictive environment. And it also guarantees parent participation in the educational planning. And it's really important to note that when you hear the term parent with regard to special education and legislation and the rules, is that parent refers to biological and adoptive parents, foster parents, guardians, people acting in place of a biological parent, such as a grandparent or a step-parent or another relative with whom the child resides. So parent is really an inclusive term when you see that tonight in our presentation. So who gets special education service? So first of all, students need to qualify through an evaluation and eligibility process. And through that, we need to first determine the presence of a disability in one of the federal disability categories. And we'll look at those categories more specifically later on. But the first thing that the student has to meet is they need to qualify through the evaluation and eligibility process. And then the second thing is the student must demonstrate a need for special education related services, a need for that individualized, specialized instruction. So the road to receiving special education is a 6-step cycle. It starts out with the referral, then we move on to evaluation, then we determine eligibility, then we design an individualized education program or IEP. The next step is instruction and monitoring. And the final step in the cycle is annual review. Today, we're just going to look at the first 3 steps in the cycle. Those are the ones that get the student through the door: referral, evaluation, and eligibility. So you're probably wondering, who can make a referral? So this is the first step, and really anyone can make a referral. Parent can make a referral, a teacher or a guidance counselor can make a referral, or even someone like a doctor or a specialist or a social worker. So the referral can be made either orally or in writing. If it's made orally, it's really best that you follow it up with something in writing, either an email or a written letter, so that you have documentation of your request. And some school divisions may have an online form that you need to fill out. So once the referral is made, the school must respond within 3 days. And the different responses that they can have are really 3 different responses. The first thing they can do is deny the request. If they deny the request, they need to provide information on how to appeal. The second thing they can do is honor the request and initiate an evaluation immediately. This is really rare. So the most common thing that schools will do within 3 business days is that they will send the request onto a school team. This team might be called a child study team. It could be called the local screening committee, or another name. So it varies from school to school, from school district to school district. And that team will review the existing information. They'll look at teacher reports. They'll look at classroom assignments, the child's performance on local and state assessments. And they'll also gather and consider information that the parents provide. The parents are part of this team and will, be an integral part of providing information. So once the referral is approved, we move into the evaluation stage of the cycle. The evaluation is the process of collecting information about the student, about their learning needs, through a series of tests, observations, talks with the student, talks with the family, and others that are involved with the student. And that information is then used to determine whether the child has a disability, as well as the nature and extent of the special education and services that the child needs. There's some important things to know about the evaluation. The first is that there's no cost to the family. The evaluation is done free of charge. The second is that parents are team members. As in the referral meeting, parents should be included in the meeting. They must be given notice and invited to all meetings. And parents need to provide consent before new assessments are given. Evaluations are complete and decisions must be made within 65 days of referral. So from the date of the initial referral to the eligibility determination must be within 65 days. It's also important to know that written reports are made available 2 days in advance of the meeting. So if the school has not provided you with the report 2 days out, be sure to ask for it. So that way you can go over it, you can be prepared, you can write your questions down and go into the meeting, and not have the surprise of finding stuff out when you get there. So if they don't provide it to you, then make sure you ask for it 2 days out. Okay, Beth's gonna tell us a little bit now more about the evaluation.
Yeah, so thanks, Renee. So State regulations require that the assessments be done by qualified professionals in all areas related to the suspected disability, including health, vision, hearing, social emotional status, general intelligence, academic performance, communicative status, motor abilities, and adaptive behaviors. And these may include educational, medical, sociocultural, psychological, or developmental assessments. And just note that hearing must be screened for each child suspected of a disability during the initial determination of eligibility. So, next slide. Thanks, Renee. So we're going to talk about the sociocultural assessment because it's one part of the evaluation where caregivers and parents really have a chance to provide input. So it's the sociocultural assessment is it's a document that's written by a qualified school social worker, and it describes family history, the structure of the family and dynamics, developmental and health history, social adaptive behaviors at home, in the school, and the community. And this is, so the information is obtained through parents, and also records can be reviewed, student records, and there'll be consultation with staff and teachers. So next slide. Consent needs to be given for this assessment, and the information on the assessment is private, and it will not be shared with students or parents. And the part about this assessment that is valuable is it does give the school insight from the family about the child's struggles and strengths at home or in the community. And in conjunction with other assessments, it may provide evidence of the need for special education practices or services. So for instance, if your child is doing well at school, or the child looks like he or she isn't struggling at school, but homework is a real issue at home and it's causing a lot of friction, this is your chance and opportunity to talk about what happens to the child at home in relationship to school. So it's a good opportunity to tell the school what's really happening at home so they have an idea of the needs of the child and how it's impacting the child and the family. Okay, so next slide.
So the sociocultural is one area of the evaluation. Another area of the evaluation is the educational assessment. And the educational assessment is where the team is going to get information on the students' reading, writing, and math achievements. In Virginia, this is completed by a special educator, and generally includes an educational test that's individually administered and standardized, such as the Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement, where they'll get standardized test scores, which means there'll be test scores that are compared to other kids their age. How are they doing in each of those areas of reading and writing and math? The educational evaluation will also include classroom-based assessments, looking at work samples or tests that are given in the class, as well as school and system-wide measures, such as the standard of learning assessments or the phonological awareness literacy screening. Another area of the evaluation will be the psychological evaluation, and this is completed by a school psychologist. And the school psychologist will select procedures and tools that will help answer the referral questions. Generally, the school psychologist will do a test of intellectual cognitive functioning. And this provides a measure of general intellectual functioning and helps the team to know how a child learns, and how quickly they will they'll learn new information, Some common examples of this is the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children. You might hear that called the WISC, or the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scales, or the Woodcock-Johnson Test of Cognitive Abilities. The psychologist may also do some standardized tests to look at strengths and weaknesses in cognitive abilities or processing skills. These include tests of visual motor integration, phonological processing, and visual perceptual skills. School psychologists often use a lot of rating scales to look at the presence or the frequency of some emotional or social or adaptive behaviors and skills. Typically, these are given to parents and teachers. You may hear names like the BASC, the Behavioral Assessment System for Children, or the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scales. And often older students are even asked to provide ratings of their own behavior and skills. It can be really useful to see how a student perceives themselves relative to their peers. The BASC is one instrument that includes a self-report scale that teens or older children can fill out. Many school psychologists will include observations to gather information about how the student's learning and their behavior, as well as conducting interviews with students and parents and teachers. Depending on the referral question and the needs, there are many other areas that could be included in the evaluation. The team may ask for a speech language assessment to determine current levels of functioning in voice, fluency, articulation, or language. A vision screening may be completed by a nurse or another trained personnel to determine visual acuity. A medical report can be completed by a licensed physician to rule out or identify any medical problems related to the disability, the suspected disability. There may be an occupational therapy assessment to determine participation in daily classroom tasks and management of tools and materials in the classroom. The evaluation could include a physical therapy assessment to evaluate functional mobility and movement and motor performance, or a functional vision assessment to see how the student uses his or her vision and the impact on educational performance. And lastly, the evaluation will include an observation. So if parents disagree with the school's evaluation, they have the right to request an independent educational evaluation, or IEE, conducted by a qualified person who does not work for the school. So the parents can request that the school pay for the independent educational evaluation. However, the school may ask for a due process hearing to show that its evaluation is appropriate. Parents can choose any qualified examiner who meets the requirement that the LEA applies to its own evaluators. The school will usually supply a list, but parents don't have to choose from this list. And the school can put limits such as cost or distance from school. Even if it's decided that the school does not have to pay for the evaluation, parents still have a right to an independent educational evaluation. If this is the case and the family does pay for the independent educational evaluation, they can determine whether or not to share the information with the school. So once the evaluation is complete, the team will reconvene to determine eligibility for special education related services. As mentioned earlier, families should receive copies of the evaluation report at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. If you don't receive it, be sure to request it. The IDEA legislation and special education regulations outline specific categories of disability under which a student must qualify in order to receive services. You can see here the 13 different disability categories that IDEA lists, and under which a student can be found eligible for special education services. There is a 14th category here, developmental delay for children ages 3 to 9. which is at the discretion of the state and local school systems. And you will find that here in Virginia. Each of these categories has different criteria to meet in order to qualify under that category. Most school districts have worksheets listing the criteria. And during the eligibility meeting, the team will review the list to determine which of any of these categories the student qualifies for. So here you see a sample eligibility worksheet for other health impairment from the Arlington Public Schools. So these vary slightly from school district to school district, but they're very similar in the layouts. You see first the definition of other health impairment, which includes ADHD. And then the worksheet goes through each of the required criteria for determining whether the student meets the qualifications of a student with other health impairment. And then you'll see the final question asks whether there's a need for specially designed instruction. A diagnosis alone is not sufficient to qualify for special education. The student must be found to need specially designed instruction in order to access the general curriculum. The decision about eligibility category is unique and specific to each child, so it's based on their needs. And the team can look at more than one disability category. It's important for families to know that the decision is not a vote or majority when it comes to determining eligibility. The team should work toward a consensus. And if the group does not reach a consensus and the decision doesn't reflect a particular group member's conclusion, that group member should write a written statement of dissent. Oh. So when the eligibility team, which remember includes the parents, decides that a child is eligible for special education, the team is obligated to select which category of disability is listed as the child's primary disability. Legally, which box is checked doesn't alone determine the goals or services or placement. Okay. Ultimately, there are many pros and cons to the use of labeling in special education, but there's a key takeaway here. And that is that children with special needs are able to receive the proper assistance and resources to address their individual needs. Special education labels are a means to meeting the purpose of ensuring educational success by providing specially designed instruction, accommodations, and supplementary aids and services that reduce the barriers to learning. With that being said, if you don't agree with the team's decision, if you do not think that they selected the category that best describes your child's disability, you do have the right to disagree, and you should submit your disagreement in writing. For students who are found eligible for special education, the next step is to develop an individualized education program, or IEP. The IEP is the legal written document that describes the educational program designed to meet the child's needs. It states the goals that are set up for the student, as well as the supports and services that the school district will provide. The IEP must be presented within 30 days of the eligibility meeting, and parents are an important part of that team that creates the IEP. If your child is found eligible for special education and related services and you disagree with that decision, or if you don't want your child to receive special education and related services, you do have the right to decline these services for your child. Oh. Sorry about that. And then if the eligibility team decides that your child is not eligible for special education, the school system must tell you in writing and explain why your child has been found not eligible. So this, under IDEA, the school system has to provide you with information on what you can do if you disagree with this decision. Some of the options include an informal resolution, making a complaint to the state Department of Education, mediation at no cost to the family, and due process hearings, which are very expensive. If you do find yourself in this situation and you have questions or you need help figuring out what steps to take next, our staff are always available for consultation. You can go to our website or call the number and get a consultation and some help on next steps going forward. So now I want to open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in the chat box.
In the questions pod.
Oh, in the questions pod. I'm sorry.
It's the questions pod. That's okay. And I actually have another poll, if you don't mind, since we were done a little early. We'll do another poll. If I can make this. Let's see. All right. Just a quick one to get a sense of who we have in the audience in terms of your experience. Here you go. So the question is, what is your experience with evaluation for special education? We'll give you a few moments to complete that. Responses are coming in. Thank you. Okay, we'll give it another 5 seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results. And I know it may be hard to see that, Renee, so I'll just read. We did not have anyone respond that they referred their child, but the school did not evaluate. So true to your point, Renee, that it is pretty unusual that if there's good reason that they do not pursue evaluation. 17% said the child was evaluated and found ineligible, and 83% said the child was evaluated and found eligible for special education. So that sounds like it was a successful process for folks. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. Maybe. Nope. Hold on. I'm having a little trouble here. Hold on. Well, we have a question. Oh, there we go. Okay. We have a couple questions. So I'm going to just go ahead and ask, and Renee, you can decide if you or Beth are the best one to answer this question.
I can't
the child.
them, so.
Okay, a child is in foster care, has not been referred yet, but hasn't shown many. Okay, so I think one person is sharing their status. So the child is in foster care, has not been referred yet, but shown many challenges to learning. So I'm so glad that you are here tonight, because this hopefully will be a good path forward for you. Thank you. Okay, and yes, so the question was from Akasa, are these materials appropriate to forward families to simplify the process or destigmatize the diagnosis for those who might be overwhelmed? And if not, are there other FFF materials that might serve this purpose? So Beth, I know that you may have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think that when you have families that are afraid of the stigma, one of the things that I find useful is to talk about what the goal is and how the child's going to get helped. So I know that families are worried about the category in which their child is found eligible. And that, as Renee said, is really just a means to an end. It doesn't really, I mean, it may matter to you as far as the category that they're found eligible under, but they're still going to receive services. So I wouldn't worry about that so much. And also just the stigma itself of having an IEP. I think if you normalize it, depending on the age of the child, I think the younger the child is, the easier it is because they don't know any different. But if the child's older, you just explain to the child why they have an IEP and what's going to happen, and give them step-by-step directions so they don't come to school confused or not understand maybe why they've been moved to a different classroom or something like that. I hope that answers your question.
And again, keep those questions coming. I did want to say, since you asked about other material, thank you, Beth. That was a really helpful response. And Beth is going to talk later in our series about some of the challenges around labeling and some of the issues, particularly with foreign families, as we struggle with diagnoses and going forward as a young person grows and begins to sort of identify their own individual needs and challenges. But you did ask about other materials, and I just want to point out, we didn't discuss this at the beginning, but one of the newer services, thanks in large part to Renee and Beth, who are here with us tonight, is a standing up of a learning management system, a set of online courses that includes a special education 101 course. And those courses are open, they're free of charge to access, and individuals can sort of go at their own pace. There is a flyer about the Learning Your Way courses in your handouts pod. So if you're a CASA and you're working with a family that might benefit from some basic information about special education and doesn't want to maybe be overwhelmed in one very densely packed hour of a webinar, feel free to access those Learning Your Way modules, those courses. That's a good way to, and there are certificates for completing those. So that is another way that folks can get information. Other courses in that set of courses includes Special Education 101, Constructive Communication and Collaboration, and a course that Beth helped us stand up, which is Trauma 101, and includes some information about trauma, which I think impacts a lot of us in this room. Oh, great. And Yvonne says, thank you for your response, Beth, and she'll review the Learning Your Way modules. Wonderful. We have a happy customer, hopefully. I did include in the chat box the link to our evaluation for tonight. So if you do have a chance to just click on that, it's about 10 questions, and it does help us know if we're meeting the needs of our target audiences. So please take a few moments and fill that evaluation out. And I'm going to just give it a few more minutes, see if there's some more questions that pop up in the questions pod. In the meantime, Beth and Renee, did you have anything else you wanted to add about initial evaluation? I know that all three of us here on the Foreign Families Forward side live this and have gone through initial and reevaluations, and we've had tales to tell.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to try to not worry about the label or the stigma of it, and focus on the fact that like all children learn differently and have different strengths and weaknesses, and through the evaluation process, you can help identify those, and hopefully get the whether or not the child ends up being found eligible or not, just going through the process can get a lot of information that will help moving forward. It will help them, find the ways that they're going to learn best and best meet their needs.
Yeah, and I would just say, I would add, I think that's really important to note. And then also just, if you suspect something is wrong, don't be afraid to do your own referral, because a lot of times the school may miss stuff. And so if you suspect something is not right, or your child is experiencing challenges that you think the child shouldn't be experiencing, then don't be afraid to refer the child. The earlier the better, because the more help that child will get.
And Renee, would you just skip back to the independent educational evaluation? There was a lot of information on that slide, and that is a really important and not often discussed and not often shared freely and openly in every meeting about this option. That if you do go through the evaluation process and the school determines based on their assessments and evaluations that the child is not eligible for services and you believe that the child in your care does need additional specialized instruction, you have this option. And it is in your statement of procedural safeguards that's handed to you. But that's a very dense document, and sometimes this slips through. And this is really important information for you to know that you have the right to request an independent educational evaluation. And for many of our families, it's important that we have a provider, someone who can evaluate children who have trauma histories, who may have significant challenges in their past. And so you may need a specialized provider to deliver a fair, equitable evaluation using unbiased tools in their native language, et cetera. So it's really important that you know about this option if you are not successful or you disagree with the evaluation that the school has completed. The other one little note I wanted to make, Renee, and I think it was an earlier slide when you talked about the 65 days. The day counts are tricky in special education, and 65 days, just so you know, those are business days. So if you are looking at your calendar and say, gosh, it was a long time since we got that referral through, know that may be why. It is 65 business days in the case of an evaluation, the time that a school division is allowed to take to complete that evaluation. All right, any other questions? Again, you can use the questions pod. And again, we encourage you to fill out that evaluation if you will. And if you need a certificate of attendance, that email address is in the chat box as well. And of course, we'd love to have you connect with us on social media at any time. I'm not seeing any other questions. Again, Beth and Renee, any last words?
Nope. Everyone have a great night. Thanks for coming. Yeah. And we hope to see you in a couple weeks at the
over the next 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
We have 3 more.
Oh, I did think of one thing. Snow days do not count as business days, just so people know. I learned that.
Thank you. That sounds like something that you learned the hard way. Oh, one more question came in. Sorry, we did have one question. My child did not qualify for an IEP because she has a 504. Is this just as binding as an IEP? Renee, you want to take a swing at that one?
Well, the main difference with a 504 is that you're not going to have the specialized instruction. You're gonna you get the accommodations without the individualized specialized instruction. And yes, I mean it is binding. It is also a legal document, and the school is required to follow that document.
Thank you on that. Did get a question about IE materials. CASA family is not aware of this. That's unfortunately not surprising. So I'm so glad you are their CASA and that you will be helping advocate for them and helping them get to that place where they can empower themselves. So they are in a reevaluation stage. Does this apply equally to reevaluation? And yes, we are covering that topic next week. It's very similar. There's not a lot of a lot of the basic procedures are similar in reevaluation, but the school system typically does not need to do and typically does not want to do a full evaluation if there's no reason to do like a repeat, for example, on hearing. If there was no hearing issues found in the first screening, they likely will not propose or ask for consent to do another hearing evaluation. It gets a little trickier when you're talking about the educational piece and the cognitive piece. And so we will talk a lot about that next week. Okay, getting a lot of positives and helpful comments here. Okay. All right. And again, you're welcome to contact us at any time. You can always use the info@formfamiliesforward.org. And again, our full set of slides are in the handouts pod if you want our individual email addresses. Okay, I think that we will call it an evening. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Beth. And thank you to all of our wonderful participants.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.